Let's do a quick recap. A 5-minute recap. Then we'll do a quick vayt. Happens to be, it is, and I find that sometimes this is when Chazarah is weak. It's rather an easy Gemara. Because it's an easy Gemara, we rather covered a nice amount of pace. But the Chazarah, it's in one ear and not even out the next. Didn't even go in the first ear. Says the Mishnah, where would you shake the Dalin Minim? Says the Mishnah, Hashem, beginning and end. Hashem, Divrei Beis Hillel. Beishamei Oimrim, I have to have a Meiriv, just reminding myself. Beishamei Oimrim, Af, Hashem Aslichona. Ami Rabbi Akiva. Soifa, you see Rabbi Gamliel, I gaze the Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua. Shekolam, everyone, and guess what? They are not shaking Ella. Anna Hashem Mashiach. No.
What are the guys that shake the whole time? They always have like they have to.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. There's been Hagim, there's Zachen. I'm not saying all of them actually make sense, but Rabbi Khan Frankel, Erev Tov. Says the Hilgi Gemara, Na'anua, we're in the middle of a Shikha Chazar from last night. Says the Gemara, Lamed Zayin Mebeis, Na'anua Mandachar Shmei. Who mentioned anything about Na'anua? Meaning, the Mishnah starts, where do you shake? What do you mean, where do you shake? What's the shaking business? Answers the Gemara, Hassam Guy, it's going on the other Mishnah. Called, we'll live at the beginning of the parak. The Mishnah taught it's called, is Kash. Vika Amar, and on that says our Mishnah Erev Tov Rav Sroli. Heichad Minan, no, he's on. Heichad Minanin, where is it shaken? So that's where our Mishnah picks up from the previous Mishnah. Period. Now, what's the source? Tanan Hassam, we learned to the Mishnah, Shtei Alechem, Shtei Kipsei Aseres, the two breads and the two sheep. Kate said, I said, what would they do with them? And Shtei Lechem al Kabe Shnei Kvasim. They put the bread on the sheep. And they placed their hands underneath them. Umanif, and you shake them, and they will wave them literally. Manif means wave. Umaylech, umayvi, mala, mayr, to and fro, up and down. Where do we know? Shenemar, sharhunaf, vasharhuram. Period. Amar Rav Yechanan, umaylech, umayvi. Now Rav Yechanan explains why. What are we doing? Shaking. What are you doing? Says Rabbi Yochanan, we're showing, we're shaking to the one that the four directions are is. In the west, in Eretz Yisrael, they learned Tachi. To hold back the bad winds, ra'is that are bad. Mala Mayrid, Kedilatzer Tlolim Raim told back to bad do. Now, just parenthetically, the Gemara doesn't really explain how does shaking act to hold back the winds. Like what's the depth of that?
So you push them when you're doing your mitzvah.
Yeah. What does that mean? Yeah, it's one of these things like the Gemara says, like, yeah, it's normal. You're pushing away the winds. Like, I don't know, I'm shaking a piece of a tree. I don't know. Anyways, lots of Torah. Amar Rav Yisrael, Rav Yisrael Zvida. Zoyse Meretz, we learn out from here in the Talmud Machasav and Aleph. Shiyarei mitzvah, the leftovers, the remnants, the auxiliary parts of the mitzvah are able to ma'akvin as hold back the punishments. What do we see this from? Shaharei tenufa, the waving shar mitzvah, is the remnants of the mitzvah. Vayitzaras ruchais, it holds back the winds, it's lalim rayin and the bad dues. And now after this whole shtickle, which was all about waving the shtei alechem, the two breads on Shavuot, says Rava, chein belulav. Ravacha bar Yaakov mamtile umaisile, he would shake it to and fro. And Amar, you know what he would say? Din geira be'inei desitna. There should be an arrow. Din this geira, an arrow be'inei desitna on the eye of the sultan. Remarks and comments the Gemara that is not the correct thing to say. Palav and Milsa he. Why? Because you're going to come to incite the Satan. You never want to say, oh, I got the Satan under my control. Don't test the Satan. He will come back with a vengeance.
We say Shari Tnufa, Shari Mitzvah. That's going on the Lulav or on the Shelach?
Stelach. And that's why, says Rava, v'chein belulav.
But isn't the whole thing?
It's both.
Kosher comes only.
Oh, very good. Very good. What are you pointing out?
I'm saying the shake is like a more of an afterthought.
So that's the shaking of the shtei halechem. The Gemara from Tinan Asam all the way to here was talking about the shaking of the shtei halechem. The ikar mikar of all these things is the shtei halechem. The shtei halechem.
You can't say v'chein blue because.
And then v'chein lulav. Whatever we just said about the shtei halechem, that by waving these breads it holds back the winds and it does all these graces achin, that din also applies to lulav. It's a fascinating thing. This whole shmoo is not really about a lulav. It's about waving the shtei halechem. Then it says Rava, the same thing applies to the lulav. Mamish, the same thing.
The question by Lulav, it says Lulav could deal in our name. That's the question.
Good. So now we're just saying, where do we know that from? From the shtei halechem. What do we do by the shtei halechem and held back the winds? V'chulu. Says Rava, does the same thing by the lulav. Says the Heilige Mishnah. Misha Baba Derech. Someone is traveling. Literally, me. Shabbat, someone who comes by derech on the road. Lulav, and he doesn't have a lulav. Little to take. When he gets to his house, when he enters his house, Yitol al shulchanai, he should take it on his table.
Can you do it right there?
That's what it literally means. Says the Mishnah. Let's go a little weiter.
Take it on his table?
Let's see.
Rashi.
Loi natal. Yeah, we'll see Rashi. Yeah, we'll see Rashi. 1 second. Loi natal shachris. You're gonna do it in the morning. Yitol bein arbaim. Take it in the afternoon. Shekol hayoim kosher lelulav. Says the Gemara. What does it mean? Not loy al shachanim. Before we get to the Gemara, let's look at Rashi. Rashi's gonna foreshadow and help us with this one. Says Rashi. Im shachach loy natal koydem achila. You just came home, long day work. So what do? You sit down, dive right into the food. You're like, oh shoot, I didn't do lulav. Says the Mishnah. Yitel al shulchanai. What does that mean? Zok Rashi. Sorich lahafsik sudah. So you got to stop eating. You have a mitzvah you have to do. Lita lulav. We're about to come to Purim. A big shmooze is eating before Megillah. So for us men, it's not as challenging because we go straight from Ma'ariv at the end of the fast into Megillah. So we go straight. What about a woman who's in the first year of the Megillah at 10 o'clock at night? Is she allowed to eat? What's going on? You're not allowed to eat. Yitel al shulchanai. So much so, if you're in the middle of a meal, you have to stop. Okay, so we're going to see. Maybe a din of a shaymer and a reminder. Let's get. That's the Mishnah. Says the Gemara. Amrit, you just said, the Mishnah just taught us, Night al shulchanai, take it on his table, which meant what? Interrupt your shulchan, interrupt your suda to take the lulav. Lememra, says the Gemara, this seems to imply timafsik, that you have to stop your suda to take the lulav. Viriminu, I'm going to ask you a contradiction. Says the Gemara in Shabbos, if you begin eating, ein mafsikin, you don't have to stop for, Rashi points out, so about tfilas mincha, if you started early enough, you don't have to stop for a whole list of things. So why here does it sound like you have to stop for the lulav? Amar Rav Safra loikasha. Hadika shehos bayim. This one, the ika there is shehos time b'yoyim during the day. Over here the leka shehos b'yoyim. There's no time. If you're eating and shkia is about to come, stop, drop, and roll. You got to take that lulav. If you're eating and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, okay. No, keep it eating because you're gonna have time. Period. So we had a stira contradiction between our Mishnah and the Mishnah in Shabbos as to whether you have to stop. Answers the Gemara. Depends on what time it is. If there's time to finish eating and still have time to take the lulav, you're allowed to. It's getting close to the end of the day, then you're not allowed to.
Why would someone just
No, I mean, you're sitting down to a meal and it's getting close to Shkia. So what do you got to do? Which it happens to be, and let's say today's Shkia was 5:45ish. So we can imagine you came from work at 5 o'clock and you forgot about lulav. You know, you were traveling, you were this, you were that. You start to sit down to dinner with your wife, 5:30, 5:40. Oh my gosh, I didn't take lulav yet. So you got to stop and do lulav. Now, if it was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you also should have done lulav first. Because your chil of lulav started hours ago. But you didn't. But do you have to stop your meal? No. Once you start eating, you don't have to stop. Amai Rava, says Rava, 1 second over here. Says Rava, my kushya. What was your kasha? Let's say it again. We had a Gemara in Shabbos that spoke about davening mincha. And the Gemara there said, do you have to stop? Said the Gemara, no. Our Mishnah is talking about lulav. It said you have to stop. Says Rava, what is the comparison? Dilma, perhaps, hadaraisa, hadarabanan. When it came to tfilas mincha, that's a din derabanan. On a din derabanan, okay, you don't have to stop. But on a tilas lulav, which is a din deraisa, asks Rava, I don't understand. Lulav's a deraisa, so of course you have to stop. And la my Rava, so rather comes along Rava, and Rava didn't like the whole kasha. Again, Rava's not arguing on the teretz. The Rava's arguing on the kasha. Rava's came in the middle of discussing, oh, we had a Mishnah on Shabbos that said you don't have to stop. We have a Mishnah on Sukkah. They said you have to stop. And they explained, oh, you know what the Chiddush is? A Groisa Chiddush. Is there time? Rava says, what are you guys doing? You Pasha missed the boat. No shaykhis. It's a Dindarabanan. It's a Dindaraisa. Elamai Rava, so rather says Rava, I'll tell you what the kasha is. E kasha, if you're asking a question, oh kasha. This is the kasha. When you enter your house, what did the Mishnah see? What do we see? The mafsik. V'hadar tani, but then the Mishnah itself says, Loy natal shachris, yital ben arbayim. Alma, what do you see? Loy mafsik. The Mishnah seems to imply, yeah, who cares when you do it? Don't, you did it now? Okay, you didn't do it now, you'll get it later. So which one is it? So my Rav Safra loy kasha. And that's where Rav Safra said his chiddush very good, Rav Abi. If you come home from work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so what's the halacha? You didn't take it in the morning? No big deal. Take it in the afternoon. If you came home and it's a mamish about to be shkia, then yital al shulchanai, drop, stop, and roll. Oh, that's all the chatzchil avad. Talking about someone that, which, by the way, it could be very, whether you should be working on Chol Moed or not, it's different shmooze, but this guy had to. So he went out to work for, early in the morning, perfectly allowed. He needed to daven, okay, he chapped davening wherever he was able to. Avada, maybe it wasn't the most lechatchila, but he was yaitzi, he's chiyuv. And then he didn't do luf. Now he's coming home and he got to deal with the luf. Okay. Omar Rav Zira says to Rava. So again,
what's the issue with stopping? Like, why is that so complicated? You stop for
No.
a minute, you shake the lulav, and you go back.
It's not complicated. Not complicated, but you're surely you're halfway through a steak. Not complicated. Do you have to stop?
Right, so I'm saying, what's the
not-
difficulty here that you don't?
It's not a question of
stop it,
difficulty. It's a question of if you're mechuyev to. Ain't a chanami. Avada, you could always stop. Avada, the question
is it talking about benching? Is that what the issue that you have to bench?
You have to stop. Do you have to stop? Since the Stamakasha people have on every Shabbos. It comes the time of Mincha. Do you have to stop? We never stop. We're sitting eating our sudas, by the way, and Zman Mincha comes. And we don't stop eating. What's the big deal? Take a break from your suda for 20 minutes and go daven. Okay?
Right.
We don't have to for whatever reason it is. You're right. What's the big deal? Shaila is what's the halacha?
The right is part is on the lulav.
Yes, lulav's the deraisa.
Okay.
Tefillah is the rabba.
Only for the first day. Rest of the Yom Tov.
You're making an interesting point. Yeah, let's for the moment think assume it's the first day. It could be the other days. There's elements of a deraisa. Let's assume it's the first day. So Amar, so again, Subshan number one was we had a stira. We answered, is there time? Rava was bothered. What's your kasha? Deraisa derabanan. Says Rava, the difference is that you says Rava, the kasha is when you come home, would you have to take it or not? Depends if there's time. Now comes along Rav Zera. Rav Zera, my koshia. What's your question? Dilma mitzvah lafsuki. Maybe it's a lechatchila b'diavad. Maybe you know what the mitzvah is? To stop. V'loim ba'asik, and let's say you didn't. Yeah, you came home from work and you should have taken a lulav. You didn't. You sat down to lunch. And then you finish lunch. Like, oi. Because you have a chiyuv of lulav waiting for you. How you let it? Either you might forget, or maybe you just stop. Maybe stop. You have a chiyuv. We're saying. Oh, so that's a good kash in general, which we have to deal with. That has to do with that not every Isaac mitzvah is patim in a mitzvah because sukkah is something you do at the same time. But eating is not necessarily a you already yotze. It's not already yotze your chiyuv sudas yamtiv. Once you took the first bite, you're asking a question. No, it's a big shmooze. Big shmooze that when it comes to sukkah, you close do both simultaneously. Yeah. So Amar Rav Zera, my kushya, says Rav Zera, whoa, what's going on over here? Dilma Mitchell Lefsuki. What do you ask? You asked at the beginning of the Mishnah said you come home, you got to take the lulav. Then the Mishnah said you didn't take it in the morning, you take it in the afternoon. Says Rav Zera, what's your problem? Dilma Mitchell Lefsuki. Maybe the pshat is really lechatchila v'ada. You're supposed to stop. What if you didn't? You didn't. Kach. Kasha lamaisa. You called up the Rav. You said, I came home at 1 o'clock. I sat down to lunch. I ate lunch. Now it's 3 o'clock. I didn't do lulav yet. What should I do? Zok the Rav. Zok the Mishka. Take the lulav now. So what says Rav Zera? What was your whole grace of kasha? Maybe lechatchila the mitzvah was yet to stop. V'loi pasuk, and if you didn't, then the Mishnah says, "You'll rain on dvayim shekolay yom kasher lulav." Because the whole day is kasher lulav. So Elam Rav Zera comes along with a third way of learning the kasha. La'olam really kedam rida meikar. Really was what we said originally. That what a kasha from the Mishnah on Shabbos. And the kashalach and you Rav are bothered. Haderaisa haderabanan. Avi's teretz. Hacha biyantav sheni. Derabanan askinan. And that's the kasha. Our Mishnah says what? You don't have to stop. Excuse me, you have to stop. The Mishnah Shabbos says you don't have to stop. What's going on? They're both Rabbanan. And it explains the Gemara. Tekanami, this is precise, it's meduyak. Midikatani, what did the Mishnah say? A very cute raya. Mishabah baderech lebi adalulav. Says the Gemara. And if you thought this was the first day, Mishari, is it allowed to be Baba Derech on the first day? Are you allowed to be traveling? What's going on? It's Yom Tif. So the storyline of the Mishnah proves it must have been the second day. Gishmak. So 3 ways of learning a stira. Answer to Reiser Rabbanan. Kasha Rav, what was your whole question? Explains Rav, the question was the stira from Reisha to Seifa. Kasha Rav Zera, maybe it's the Chatzchila b'diavad. Answers Rav Zera to about the second day that they're all dira banan. Stop over here and let's make sure.